This is Buddhist Books Podcast, episode 225. And when the number of the episode ends in 5, you know what that means. It's time for some Shingon Buddhism. We just started this 10 episodes ago on Buddhist Books 215. And so we're going to pick up right where we left off last time. If you would like to start at the beginning of the book rather than a few pages in, you can click there. That's the Shingon Buddhism playlist. And other than that, I hope everybody's doing well, and I will go ahead and jump right into the reading. Picking up right where we left off. 3. So just to refresh, this was part 1, prolegomenon, esoteric doctrine and practice. And then there was a little introduction, and then A, the analysis of the breadth with a D. So breadth, like height, breadth, width. And we did part 1 of analysis of the breadth, part 2 of analysis of the breadth, and now we're about to begin part 3 of analysis of the breadth. And the way it was explained, as far as I remember, was that he's going to explain how esoteric Buddhism, or Vajrayana, is different from Mahayana Buddhism, or exoteric Buddhism. Okay. 3. The esoteric doctrine is not expedient, but true. Expedient means, i.e. skillful means, those familiar with that? So not skillful means. It's just true. All right, we'll see how it goes. Thirdly, the esoteric doctrines are merely the exoteric doctrines. Exoteric meaning for the many, as in Mahayana, great vehicle for the many. At least from this perspective, that's how they seem to be looking at it. Whereas esoteric is for the few, which is Vajrayana, right? From the Shingon perspective. Okay. If anybody's confused, please feel free to click here. That's the introduction to the Buddhist Books Podcast in general. Mostly we're focusing on pre-sectarian early Buddhism, but occasionally we look at other specific forms of Buddhism, and we've only just recently started looking at Shingon, so we're kind of getting our bearings here. And by we, I mean me, and perhaps you, if you're following along closely. Okay. Thirdly, the exoteric doctrines are merely expedient teachings, but the esoteric doctrine is the Dharma gate of truth. Exoterism, all right? I've never seen it put that way. I usually think exotericism or esotericism, but exoterism, all right? Exoterism teaches that the reward and correspondence bodies preach the Dharma in different modes according to the powers of comprehension of the audience, and they adopt various expedients in their preaching so as to convey imitations of an otherwise indescribable truth. This is called, quote, the preaching that accords with the concepts of others, end quote. The esoteric doctrine, on the other hand, is not expedient, but is the doctrine of the eternal and immutable truth. It describes the 3 mysteries of indescribable Mahavairocana's inner realization, just as they are and without change or distortion. The same teaching is revealed for all levels of beings, whatever their spiritual capacity. All alike are able to assimilate the esoteric doctrine and thus attain Buddhahood. This is called, quote, the preaching that accords with, parentheses, the Tathagata's, end parentheses, own concepts, end quote. Okay, that's the end of part 3 of the analysis in breadth of the difference between esoteric and exoteric Buddhism. And I need to turn on the AC because it's a bit warm and humid in Goa, India this time of year. We're going to be heading up northeasterly direction very soon, so there's going to be a break. You won't see me here on Buddhist Books Podcast for I'm not sure how long, 2 or 3 weeks. So I decided to go out with a Shingon episode rather than with that previous episode from Mahavaga. So that's what's happening here. 4. The quick attainment of Buddhahood. Exoteric Buddhism teaches that the sadhaka only attains Buddhahood after cultivating innumerable practices of the 6 paramitas for a period of 3 great asamkhya kalpas, which are 3 immeasurably long eons of time. Hope you're not in a hurry. His progress is laborious and gradual, quote, advancing 10 steps and slipping back 9, end quote. Esoteric Buddhism, so that was exoteric. Exoteric takes forever, it's very slow, according to. Esoteric Buddhism teaches that the attainment of Buddhahood is quick. A spiritually talented Shingon sadhaka, by cultivating the, quote, excellent practices of the 3 mysteries, end quote, can attain Buddhahood in one thought, or in one instant, while still in his present body, born from a human mother. Others, less spiritually acute, need one more birth to attain Buddhahood. And even those who are spiritually dull and foolish will prefer the way in 2 or 3, will perfect the way in 2 or 3 births. The one vehicle sects of exoteric Buddhism, the Tendai and Kigon, mention the possibility of the perfection of Buddhahood in one birth, but still cling to the concept of the 3 kalpas as immense periods of time to be passed through by the bodhisattva as he approaches Buddhahood. Okay, so he seems to be, and he indicated this earlier in the previous episode, he seems to be specifically comparing Shingon, i.e. esoteric Buddhism, with the Japanese forms of Mahayana Buddhism that existed at that time. So that's interesting. I mean, maybe there's some subtle difference between what we're going to read in a few years when we get to the Mahayana Sutras and what he's talking about, or maybe not. Maybe they're completely faithful to Mahayana as it existed in the 2nd and 3rd centuries Common Era in India, or whenever thereabouts it emerged. Okay, continuing. Others, less spiritually acute, need... Oh, we read that already. Okay. We read that already too. Edward, come on, get with it. The one vehicle sects of exoteric Buddhism, the Tendai and Kigon, mention the possibility of perfection of Buddhahood in one birth, but still cling to the concepts of the 3 kalpas as immense periods of time to be passed through by the bodhisattva as he approaches Buddhahood. Read that again, just so we'll have it in mind as we move forward. Okay. The Shingon sect alone, says Kobo Daishi, interprets the doctrine of the 3 kalpas in a non-temporal sense. Also, when the exoteric sects speak of the perfection of Buddhahood in this connection, they are not, he says, referring to the highest fruition of Buddhahood. Several sutras state that after his awakening, Shakyamuni had, that's Siddhartha Gautama, Lord Buddha, as we know him from Tipitaka, right? The Buddha, when there was only one, right? had obtained merely an expedient Buddhahood. The Buddha, the original Buddha, attained an inferior form of enlightenment, according to who? Oh yeah, Kobo Daishi. Okay, I'll keep reading. I'm not making fun, I'm just... Okay, anyway. And only later, later, attained the highest perfection of Buddhahood. So he did eventually get there. When he was, quote, surprise awakened, end quote, by a, quote, secret Buddha, end quote. The esoteric doctrines, however, teach practices that bring the Sataka not to an expedient awakening, but to the highest and most perfect Buddhahood. Okay, that was 4. Next, 5. The benefits of the esoteric doctrine. The esoteric doctrine differs from the exoteric in the benefits it confers. The Roku Do Jikyo, sorry for my poor pronunciation, divides the doctrine preached by the Buddha into 5 parts, called the, quote, 5 storehouses, end quote. 1, sutras, which are the Hinayana Agama Sutras. Hinayana meaning small vehicle, which is how Mahayana refers to Theravada, which is Buddhism. Okay. Before pre-Lotus Sutra Buddhism, right? Okay. Which are the Hinayana Agama Sutras received by Ananda from Shakyamuni Buddha. All the books behind me. That's 1. 2, Vinayas, the rules of discipline of the 5 sections received by Upali from Shakyamuni. Okay, that's these 6 books here on my right, your left. So the teachings are here, the higher doctrine is here, and a little bit down there. Okay, if you were wondering. Anyway, 3, Abhidharmas, that's over here, and a little bit down there. Which are the various sastras, such as the Vibhasa Kosa, etc., received by Katyayana from Shakyamuni. 4, Prajnaparamita Sutras, which are the Mahayana Sutras. You can't see them unless you have X-ray vision. They're in the second shelf between the end of the higher doctrine and the commentaries of the 5th century Common Era and 6th century Common Era Burmese and Sri Lankan Theravadan scholar monks' commentary on the Tipitaka. So, in other words, on Buddhist Books Podcast, generally, except for these special episodes where we jump around into the future, we're starting with 6th century BC, reading the whole Tipitaka, and then we're going to get into early Mahayana, which is behind me, then get into the Theravadan scholar monks' commentaries on Theravada, which kind of codified Theravada as it is today. And then down on the 3rd shelf, we get into kind of the second half of the Mahayana Sutras, which came after that. So it's interesting to see it that way, because these scholar monks were commenting in a time when Mahayana was already well known and had spread already around the world. I mean, around, it had spread eastward mostly from India. And so from what I've heard, I haven't read them yet, but it may have influenced one way or another the perspective of these Theravadins. Theravadan meaning adhering to the original teachings and not the Mahayana. But there was some Mahayana influence. Okay. And then similarly, the later Mahayana Sutras came around after these Theravadan scholar monks had clarified the meaning of Theravada. So that's why I'm reading them in order, because I want to watch the influences, the cross currents between Theravada and Mahayana before we even get to the Vajrayana, which is toward the end of the 3rd shelf. It's sort of like when you look at the timeline of the universe, and they talk about, the first, several billion years were like this, and then there was these billions of years, and then eventually the Earth comes around, and then there's these billions of years. And then humans, as they are today, not like post-agriculture, but just genetic humans, like 100,000 years ago, the humans that are very similar to us. Our history is the equivalent, if you put the whole life of the universe in one calendar year, then humanity exists at 11:59 p.m. on December 31st of that calendar year, and like 59 seconds. So similarly, Vajrayana is like the very, very, very like most recent development on Buddhism. So that's what we're reading here. I mean, that's kind of part of why it's like, yeah, it's very slow, right? I've heard that from Vajrayana folks. Not that it's not true. It's one of the 5 things that they say. Is like, oh, well, Mahayana and Theravada, they're very slow. All right, but there's a lot there. So I would like to know that. Since the people who developed Vajrayana in places like Nalanda University in the 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries Common Era were familiar with Tipitaka and the Mahayana scriptures that existed up to that point as they were developing Vajrayana. So I want to be familiar with it too, even if it takes me decades, which I guess they're right. It takes a long time. Sorry, sometimes I talk. I'll try not to from here on out. Okay, 5. Dharanis, the, quote, most subtle, profound, and all-containing gate, end quote. The esoteric doctrine received by Vajrasattva. I have a statue of him somewhere. Might even be, well, anyway, he's around. There's 2 of them, actually. There's one. Is that him? No. He's not here. Oh, is that him? No. Sorry, I know this is silly, but I don't know where he is. Okay, I know I have 2. All right, sorry. From Mahavairokkana Tathagata, who's over there. Never mind. All right. The Roku Harmamikyo ascribes 5 flavors to these 5 storehouses. The sutras have the flavor of fresh milk. The Vinayas have the flavor of cream. The Abhidharmas have the flavor of curd. That's yogurt, by the way, like plain yogurt. Okay. The Prajnaparamita Sutras have the flavor of butter, and the Dharanis have the flavor of ghee, which is the most refined, pure, and delicious of flavors. It's basically like refined butter, if you aren't familiar. Here in India, they use it in everything, all day, every day. But in the West, it's like, what, ghee? That's a sound? It's like, no, it has a meaning too. All right, anyway, the Dharanis are supreme among the 5 types of doctrine, being able to remove the gravest impediments, to liberate beings from the toils of samsara, and bring them quickly to realize the Dharma body of the tranquility and bliss of nirvana. Kobo Daishi therefore claims that Shingon doctrines are superior to the exoteric doctrines in the benefits they bestow. The esoteric doctrine describes Mahavairokkana's inner realization without changing it to allow for differences in the receptivity of the listeners. The Mandalas, mudras, dharanis, and other forms described in the esoteric sutras are not mere similitudes, but exact revelations of the Tathagata's inner realization. The content of the esoteric doctrine itself is itself exactly identical with what it describes, and so is able to bestow immeasurable benefits that cannot be matched by the exoteric doctrines. Look forward to getting to that. That sounds like a really good sales pitch to me. B. So that all those 5 were A. Now we're moving on to B. The analysis in depth. Okay, so that was the analysis in breadth. Now the analysis in depth. The 10 stages of mind. The analysis in depth, the second part of Kobo Daiashi's, quote, twofold analysis, end quote, of doctrines, is the classification of the 10 stages of mind, period, full stop. Okay. It orders the Buddhist and non-Buddhist schools current in Kobo Daiashi's time into a hierarchy of 10 levels according to their profundity. 1. The mind of the sheep-like and profane. So I think we can assume that it's starting with least profound and it's going to work its way up to most profound when we get to 10. All right. The compound Isho in the Japanese name of this stage translates the Sanskrit Pritagnyana, literally, quote, various births, end quote, referring to the endless cycle of rebirths endured by those who lack spiritual awareness. The, quote, sheep, end quote, are the stupid and ignorant. Sheeple? Anyone? No. This is the stage of beings in the 3 evil realms, the worldly minded who only seek the satisfaction of animal appetites. 2. The mind of the foolish child who abstains. The, quote, foolish child, end quote, is the person who leads a profane life but who has nevertheless awakened to a consciousness of ethical precepts and therefore abstains from actions that are harmful to his fellow men. This stage corresponds to, quote, the, quote, way of social action, end quote, typified by Confucianism. Okay, so on the scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being sheeple and 10 being the most profound of the schools that aren't Shingon, I assume, Confucianism is a 2, according to Kobo Daishi. Okay. 3. Sorry about the little bump there. 3. The mind with the fearlessness of a baby. The, quote, fearlessness of a baby, end quote, is the fearlessness of one who has complete faith in the gods. This is the stage of those who follow a path of worship, such as Hinduism or Taoism. All right, Kobo Daishi puts Taoism as a 3 on the scale of 10, and hideously oversimplifies Hinduism to include only devotion. I'm trying to remember the name of that, but it's not coming. Perhaps it'll come at a random point later and I'll just blurt it out in the middle of a sentence. That happens. 4. The mind, quote, parentheses, that understands, end parentheses, the non-existence of the self and the sole existence of the aggregates. The first 3 stages are called the, quote, mundane stages, end quote, and are the non-Buddhist stages. The 4th stage of mind is the first of the Buddhist stages, corresponding to the way of the sages, the Shravakayana, full stop, Bhakti yoga, there it is, devotional yoga. That's like Hare Krishna, chanting to the gods, and just say Hare Krishna 100,000 times, and your cancer will go away. You know, like that devotional, just pure devotion, right? Okay, it is the stage of realizing that the sentient being is a temporary linking together of the 5 aggregates. Okay. Which maybe that's the stage you and I are at, or maybe just me, I don't know. Which are in perpetual flux and therefore lack any real existence. It is the stage in which the 4 noble truths are understood, so that an aspiration to achieve nirvana arises. Okay, It's the beginning of aspiration toward nirvana. Okay. 5. The mind in which the seeds of karma are eradicated. This stage corresponds to the Pratyeka Buddha yana of the Hinayana, in which the sadhaka realizes the truth of the doctrine of the 12-linked chain of dependent co-origination and attains the station of the arhat. So those who were considered perfected or enlightened in terms of Theravada or Buddhism for the first 700 years are at level 5 out of 10. All right, I wouldn't expect anything else from Mahayana or Vajrayana, but it's okay. It just reminds me a little bit of the way that that Abrahamic religions that aren't the source religion will sometimes like look down their nose at the source religion. It's like, dude, that's where you came from. I mean, yeah. People don't always respect their elders. Okay, anyway, 6. But that's a Confucian concept, right? Sorry. And an Old Testament concept, too. Honor thy mother and thy father. Honor the source of your religion. Just putting my little commentary out there. Sorry, ignore it. Ignore that. Back to the scripture. I mean, this book written by Adrian Snodgrass about Kobo Daishi. I shouldn't call it scripture. 6. We normally read scripture. This is one of the first times we're reading something that's just, well, let's learn about Shingon. Okay. 6. The mind of the Mahayana, the welfare of others, that seeks, in parentheses, the welfare of others. Okay. In the 4th and 5th stages of mind, which are those of the Hinayana, small vehicle, right, Theravada, the sadhaka taught liberation for himself alone and gave no thought to the liberation of others except that they were becoming monks and they were teaching others and they were ordaining others and they were assisting others in a very organized way, partnering up with the more experienced monk, living with the less experienced monk, and then that less experienced monk would then eventually teach someone else, and they had like this whole system in order to, and they went out of their way to be socially acceptable beyond just having rules that are related to the path. They would have rules in order to blend into society and not cause controversy among the normals, the sheeple, the regular old 6th century BC Bihar folk. Yes? I have no idea what I was saying just then. All right. Well, I think I was in the middle of saying something, but it's gone now, so maybe it'll come back later in the middle of a sentence. Yes, right. The in which the Siddhaka realizes the station of the Arhat, right? Okay. The mind of the Mahayana that seeks the welfare of others, which are those of the Hinayana. The Siddhaka taught liberation for... Right. That's what I was saying, is it's false. It's just flat out false. It's one of the main sales pitches for Mahayana Buddhism is that, well, Theravada is selfish. They don't care about other people getting enlightened. They just want to get the heck out of here. No, actually, the reason you've heard of it is because it's the opposite of that. The difference between Mahayana and Theravada is that they help others to attain enlightenment while they're alive, and then hopefully they attain enlightenment, and then they don't reincarnate again after that. And then others who they taught, they are risen to a level where they can help others to become enlightened, and then they become enlightened and aren't incarnated again, and then it just kind of is a simple process by which the whole world can become enlightened, or at least anybody who's able to. Where Mahayana added an extra step, where you take a vow never to become enlightened, never to exit the wheel of samsara, never to always to reincarnate, even though you get to a point where you have the choice not to reincarnate, that you're going to reincarnate so that you can keep teaching, That's the difference between Mahayana and Theravada. It is a hideous oversimplification to say that Mahayana is the one that has compassion and wants others to become enlightened, where Theravada is entirely selfish. It's not a bunch of monks out sitting under trees in isolation. And if it was, how did they get there? Who taught them to do that? You know, like, All right. I said it. It's done. I don't need to say it again. I don't need to belabor that point. I might say it again in 50 episodes, just so, because it's important, I think. All right. You know, like when there's truth and wisdom and something useful, that's good. Let's get that. Let's absorb that. Let's learn from that. When there's like sales pitches and propaganda that contain false information, let's point that out and be aware of that, so that it doesn't disguise itself as wisdom or information that's useful, and we don't repeat it automatically like sheeple. Okay, where were we? Yes, I'll keep reading this propaganda. In the 6th stage, which is the first of the Mahayana stages, he altruistically seeks to aid others. You mean like a monk who teaches others and raises up other monks in Theravada, in the original Sangha, in the 6th century BC? 700, 800, 900 years before Mahayana was a thing? Sorry, I know I said I was going to stop. Okay, the compound Chayan in the name of this stage translates the Sanskrit word aparaptatyaya, which has two meanings, quote, welfare for the sake of others, end quote, and, quote, the supreme welfare of others, end quote. It is striving for the benefit of all other beings and not merely for one's own welfare. The ideal of the bodhisattva who vows not to re-enter nirvana until all others have been guided to liberation. This is the stage of the Vijnanavada, the first of the two stages of the, quote, provisional Mahayana, end quote, in which the sadhaka understands the doctrine of consciousness only, and that the three worlds are products of his own mind. He sees that all the dharmas of the three worlds are transformations of the storehouse consciousness, and that there is not a single dharma outside of mind. 7. The mind that is awakened to the truth that the mind is unproduced. This stage corresponds to the Madhyamaka. It's written Madhyamika here, but Madhyamaka is the word, as far as I understand, the middle way. The Nagarjuna's, he was the first name attached to Madhyamaka, from what I understand. We'll get to that eventually. That's here. It's in the list. It's in the early Mahayana. But yeah, okay. Continuing. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Okay. Yes, the second of the two, so we're in number 7, the second of the two provisional Mahayana schools. In the 6th stage, the Sadhaka realized that no dharmas exist outside of mind, but he still distinguished the thinker and the object of thought. Although I'm having some issues with my right shoulder, so it's a little bit better today, but I still have to might look a little awkward, me using my left hand for everything. Sorry. Okay, the second of the two, yes. In the 6th stage, the Sadhaka realized that no dharmas exist outside of mind, but he still distinguished the thinker and the object of thought. Although he perceived that the object is void, he still imagined that the duality of subject and object exist in the mind. Madhyamika, goes beyond this position and eradicates the duality by teaching that the mind itself is unproduced. unconditioned, immutable, and timeless, and is only definable in terms of 8 negations. It is unborn and undying, neither coming nor going, without unity or multiplicity, and without continuity or discontinuity. These 8 negations deny all conceptualizations concerning phenomena. Dun, 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 dun. Sorry. The Madhyamika teaches that when all concepts are negated, then the real nature of existence, its suchness, is revealed. This is the doctrine of the middle way of the 8 negotiations. The, quote, middle way, end quote, being the same as the, quote, 8 negotiations, end quote, because the truth of the middle way is revealed when all false views are removed. This implies that the doctrine that, quote, the removal of erroneous views equates the elucidation of right views, end quote. 8. The mind of the one way of non-action. This stage is also called the, quote, mind of the one way of the truth of suchness, end quote, and is the stage which corresponds to the teachings of the Tendai sect. Wow, he holds them in high esteem. All right? I mean, his student was the founder, right? Or something like that. There was some drama between Tendai and Shingon. The, quote, one way of non-action, end quote, but there was a falling out between them. Anyway, an ARC break for those of you. Quote, or the, quote, one way of the truth of suchness, end quote, refers to ultimate reality, and in this stage the purified mind is seen to be like a lotus, as in the description given in the Saddharma Pundarika Sutra. In the 7th stage, the non-duality of the mind and the dharmas is established, and the mind itself was seen to be void and only capable of being described by way of the 8 negations. Now the concept of the voidness of mind is itself seen to be void. But if all is void, even voidness itself, how is it possible to explain that the phenomenal world seems to exist? To answer this question, the Tendai doctrine classifies the dharmas into 3 categories: voidness, provisional existence, and middle existence. Middle existence refers to the middle way between voidness and provisional existence. All dharmas arise by dependent co-origination and are nothing but the momentary combination of causal relationships. Therefore, they are void, in spite of their voidness. However, their existence cannot be denied because they are experienced. For this reason, the Tendai attributes to them a provisional existence. The ultimate reality of the dharmas is not voidness. It is not that the dharmas do not exist, but that existence is the reverse side of voidness. And voidness is the reverse side of existence. Kuho, yu, kuho. Something. Shigi, right? Forms are the middle way of existence, voidness, and are nothing but manifestations of suchness. 9. We're almost finished, if you're wondering. The mind, parentheses, that realizes, end parentheses, the absence of self-nature. This is the stage of mind attained by followers of the Avantamsaka sect, who see that the innumerable manifestations of suchness are transformations as effects, in quotes. The previous stages considered phenomena in terms of their reality and voidness, and while the Tendai allowed them some semblance of value by giving them a provisional existence, nevertheless it did not fully transcend the antimony of the phenomenal and the real. The Avantamsaka Am I saying that correctly? Doctrine, however, recognizes the full reality of the phenomenal worlds, just as they are, and draws no distinction between the phenomenal and the real. Fa Tsang summarizes the Avatamsaka doctrine by the image of the... by the image of the net of jewels that hangs in Indra's palace, in which each of the jewels at each of the intersections of the threads of the net reflects all the other jewels, and is in turn reflected by all of the others. In like manner, the phenomenal and the real mutually reflect and interpenetrate. Quote, the universe is in each thing, and each thing in the universe. End quote. Each dharma is totality, and totality is each dharma. Okay. 10. So now this is the most profound of all. With sheeple being 1, what is 10? 10. The mind adorned by the mysteries. The 10th stage of mind is the Vajrayana. Oh, it is Shingon. Okay. I was wondering if Shingon was going to be better than 10, or Shingon is 10. All right. Okay. The diamond vehicle. Also thunderbolt vehicle, same word, Vajra. Kobo Daishi says that the, quote, adornment of the mysteries, end quote, is the culmination and fruition of all doctrines. It is the revelation of the Mandalas in the mind of the Siddhaka, who thereby fully recognizes the reality of the phenomenal dharmas and sees that they unobstructedly interpenetrate the dharma body of Mahavairocana. I remember that from last time. Remember the opening, the little teaser at the beginning? It's a good line. All right. He sees that the 10,000 existences contain the 10,000 virtues of the world of the Buddhas. The 9th stage of mind gave theoretical expression to the identity of the being and the Buddha, but did not relate it to an all-encompassing system of practice. In the 10th stage, the stage of Shingon, the doctrine of the interpenetration of the phenomenal and the real is given practical expression in rituals that identify the body, speech, and mind of the being with the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. The Siddhaka attains Buddhahood in the body as well as in the mind. He gains awakening not only by the practice of meditation, but also by the performance of bodily actions and by actions of speech. Okay. That's what we read today. And, I look forward to, learning more about Shingon. But honestly, I remain a little bit one eyebrow. I mean, it's beautiful. I've been to Mount Koyasan, and it's beautiful. I've overheard the practitioners of Shingon Buddhism who speak English, speaking in English in the tea house outside, and I honestly wasn't impressed by what they were saying. And again, the ads are very flashy. There's some good phrases, some good slogans. There's some good hey, this is some really good stuff over here we got here. But if we finally get up to a closed door that says, yeah, you have to join the cult and take a vow of secrecy, I will be very disappointed. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to, this is a thick book, so we're going to be, this Shingon part of Buddhist Books podcast is no doubt going to go on for a long time. Every 10 episodes. Most of the 8 out of the 10 episodes, we're going to be reading the English translation of Buddhism, the one that was later termed Theravada, and sometimes rudely referred to as Hinayana. And then eventually we'll get to Mahayana. And anyway, I don't intend to come off as an ass. I don't intend to come off like I'm overly skeptical. It's my natural reaction to what I just read. And those who are longtime viewers of this program know that sometimes I respond to Theravada in an unfavorable way as well. I'm just being honest. I'm not meaning to be disrespectful. I'm definitely not going to feign respect, to pretend respect, to pretend, oh, this is really profound when it's not. When it is profound, you'll know. I mean, when it's profound to me. That whole thing about interpenetrating, all that I dug that when I first read it. But then he repeated it as the catchphrase as part 10. It's like, yeah, it's a good line. You got anything else? So, again, I look forward to continuing on the journey of getting to know Shingon better. And I do still want one day, at some point in my life, to do a monastery stay in one of the Shingon temples in Mount Koyasan. I do like the aesthetic and the music and the drums and the burning wood of Shingon Buddhism and Vajrayana in general. I mean, you know what I mean. Maybe you don't know what I mean. I don't know. I'm not communicating very effectively, but nonetheless, for those of you who are still watching, thank you for being here. And again, I will be back with our regularly scheduled readings of the Tipitaka in a few weeks. And until then, I will go ahead and do the usual closing. To the north and to the south, to the east and to the west, to the spirits of light among us and to the spirits below, we send out our reverent love and compassion. May all beings be happy. May all beings be serene. May all beings be in peace. Until next time.